There you go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this 59th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. As you know by now, this webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moray Federation webinars and webinar series in progress, as shown here. Is Nicole still doing her healing series?
Yes.
Great. Then this is current. So that was probably Yvonne, right? Because I know she's part of that group.
Yes, Nicole has something at 5 p.m., 2 hours from now.
Oh, great. Well, you just go back to back.
Joe, is that you? And if so, can you change your name, please?
No, this is Yvonne.
Yeah, I know. I'm talking to Moray Federation EH facilitator.
Hurry.
Okay, moving right along here. All episodes.
Oh, it's Diana. Hi, Diana. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
All episodes of this, the Secret Teachings of All Ages, and the Treatise on Cosmic Fire series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar series you'd like to view. One great use of these is if in the subsidiary material readings that we do from other sources, if you'd like to go back and take a closer look, then this is a great way to do it. You can just pause the presentation and reread it and check it out. Okay, last month in our reading of old diary leaves, we read about the Cologne missionary conspiracy against HPB and the Theosophical movement in India, backed basically by the whole Christian presence in India, which was very evangelistic and really had it in for the Theosophical Society because they were teaching traditional spiritual values that are to be found in Hinduism and Buddhism. So they grabbed this conspiracy and backed it to try to weaken the movement. This month, we'll take a look at the aftermath of this. And these two figures here, Isabel Cooper Oakley and Charles Leadbeater, who are described in the text as accompanying HPB back to India, were famous authors in the occult tradition. You may recognize Cooper wrote the Comte de Saint-Germain, fabulous book, and Leadbeater wrote dozens of books, including Man, Visible and Invisible, The Inner Life, and The Chakras. He worked a lot with Annie Besant, and they produced many, many volumes of theosophical literature. So if we could get a reader for this, please.
I'll start it off. I have no intention at this late day to flog this dead horse. The public have taken their sides. HPB has cast off the burden of her earthly sorrows, and time is daily vindicating her greatness of character and dignity of life alms. Her personal faults and weaknesses are well nigh forgotten, and her reputation now rests upon the books she gave us, whose paramount value is being brought to view after the dust and smoke of the conflict have passed away. In company with Mr. Rudolph Gebhardt, I returned to India in the first half of November, and Madame Blavatsky followed in December, bringing with her Mr. Leadbeater and Mr. and Mrs. Cooper Oakley of London. Landing at Bombay on November 10th, I lectured on the 12th on the Theosophy Abroad in Framji Kawasji Hall to a packed audience and one of the most enthusiastic I have ever addressed.
Okay, next up.
Yvonne, can you read that, please?
Madras was reached on the 15th, and what sort of reception I had, the local papers of the day show. More than 300 students of the very Christian college whose professors had attacked HPB and a large number of our society members met me at the station with cheers, a band of musicians, addressees, garlands, and perfume sprinklings. Their joy and enthusiasm seemed boundless. The address read to me by the schoolboys is very flowery, but quivers with true affection. In certain of its sentences, they touch the very heart of the mystery of the failure of the missionaries to weaken our hold on the Indian public. For a mystery indeed, it must have seemed to them. These Indian lads identify Theosophical Society with the revival of Sanskrit literature, the reconciliation of religion with science, the throwing of light upon man's future state, the welding of the incohesive Indian caste and creeds into one brotherhood, feeling of mutual sympathy, and the defense of Aryan wisdom and Hindu honor against all critics and all corners.
Of course, the Aryan has nothing to do with Nazism. This is the name for the fifth root race given in theosophy. Okay, and next up.
Martha, can you read that, please?
Yes, here we go. With such convictions as these possessing their minds, and with such thrills of gratitude pulsing through their hearts, the poor conspiracy against HPB and the blessed ones was foredoomed to failure. Nay, was predestined to do as infinite good instead of infinite harm in the long run. One sees this in the tone of the influential Indian journals of the day. Noticing the return of Madame Blavatsky and her party, the Indian Mirror of December 20th said, the Hindu community in general is the more attracted to Madame Blavatsky because they believe that the missionaries have, in reality, attacked the ancient Hindu religion and philosophy under the guise and pretense of exposing the lady's, quote, trickery, unquote. On that account, that feeling of the native community against the missionaries and for Madame Blavatsky is very strong. The Indian Chronicle said, we are not theosophists ourselves, but we have a great respect for the founders of the Theosophical Society. It is the only foreign movement which appeals to the national feeling of India. And instead of being made the butt of ridicule and its leaders the subject of persecution, it ought to be patiently nourished. The Christian scoffers are perhaps not aware that the existence of Mahatmas is universally believed throughout India, and it is preposterous to suppose that the Padres of Madras will do any serious to that belief. Theosophy, though it may have to bear much contemporary annoyance, will come out of the fiery ordeal purer for having gone through it.
Okay, thank you, Martha. Okay, last month we finished HPB's commentary on verse 3. So we'll start this session by taking a look at the verse itself. The reason for this is that HPB's commentary does not always comprehensively address the verse itself, or does so only in part. Once in a while, not at all. And so I think it's important to actually bring to light the ideas that are expressed actually in the verse itself. So given that, first up, of the 7 elements, first 1 manifested, 6 concealed. Before developing this theme, we have to identify what the term 7 is referring to. HPB identifies them as elements, which is correct, but can be misleading, for esoterically, the elements refer to 7 different principles or conditions associated with 7 states of being within our solar system. These 7 elements are related to the 7 subplanes of the physical plane, the 7 levels of the human constitution, as well as stages of planetary unfoldment. In fact, the last paragraph of HPB's commentary identifies the last iteration of these elements of the wheels as the rounds of the Earth's 4th planetary chain. Contrast this with HPB's first statement on the verse, quote, "This sentence, as any student of occultism may see, refers to the evolution and final formation of the primitive, though compound, 7 elements on our Earth." Both statements are true, but to compass both definitions, we must understand the elements as that which conditions reality on the planes they rule. Thus, we have Earth, or the dense physical, ruling the physical plane, water ruling the astral, or conditioning that astral reality, fire, the mental, etc. Okay, so back to the verse. First one, manifested, 6 concealed. In this phrase, HPB links the worlds and the elements and identifies this element as, quote, "Father, Mother, the differentiated world's soul." Then further describes it as cosmic dust and fire, mist, akasha, jivatma, and divine astral light. This astral light's not the lower astral as we know it from the writings of DK, but more akin to the second or monadic subplane. TCF gives us a good definition of akasha early in its pages. Could we get a reader for this, please?
And can you read that for us, please?
On the highest plane, the combination of these 3 factors, active heat, latent heat, and the primordial substance which they animate, is known as the sea of fire, of which akasha is the first differentiation of pregenetic matter. Akasha in manifestation expresses itself as Fohat, or divine energy, and Fohat on the different planes is known as ether, air, fire, water, electricity, ether, prana, and similar terms. It is the sum total of that which is animated, or vitalized, and of all that concerns itself with the adaptation of the form to the needs of the inner flame of life.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Any thoughts about this? Key here is the term manifested, which is the mother aspect of Father, Mother. Okay. Next, we have 2 manifested, 5 concealed. Going back to the Treatise on Cosmic Fire quote, we discover that DK reveals the order in which the elements unfold, and that the second element, ether, spelled with a conjoined AE, is associated with the Atmic plane. We get confirmation of this association in another chart originally published in the Theosophist in 1900 and reprinted in A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. Note also that all these successive elements are differentiations of Fohat. Again, these progressively involutional elements are verified in the chart, ether, air, fire, water, earth, right? And there's and the Hindu or Sanskrit equivalents, right? Akasha Tattva, Vayu Tattva, Agni Tattva, Apastattva, and Prithvi Tattva are the Hindu equivalents for not only the elements involved, but also the senses connected with those elements. Okay. Okay, the second stanza of Dzyan from a treatise on cosmic fire, not the Secret Doctrine version, exactly describes this second stage. Could we get a reader for this, please? Oh, wait a minute, I'm going to do this because I comment in between here. So first is Om, said the Mighty One, and sounded forth the word. So the AUM initiates the descent of spirit into form manifestation. By the way, the AUM is short for a longer phrase that is hidden from us that represents the three stages of manifestation, but it plunges the spirit into form. That's its nature. Okay, and then we have the sevenfold waves of matter resolve themselves and varied forms appear. These 7 waves of matter are the 7 elements described in the first line. Each took its place, each in the sphere ordained. So DK tells us elsewhere in his writings that the subplanes of the cosmic physical plane are actually spherical. They waited for the sacred flood to enter and to fill. The sacred flood is the life aspect, for as yet the forms were empty shells. The builders responded to the sacred sound. In musical collaboration, they attended to the work. All building is done through some specific series of intoned sounds, which animate the lesser builders, who in turn direct the elementals to create the various forms. Thus, the sheaths are literally sung into being. They built in many spheres, beginning with the third. Upon this plane, their work commenced. As we just learned, Akasha is the first differentiation of pregenetic matter. They built the sheaths of Atma and strung it to its primary. The sheath of Atma is itself sevenfold, representing the 7 subplanes of the Atmic plane. The primary to which the sheath is strung is probably the Atmic permanent atom, or it may be the monadic sheath. Interpreting old commentary is not an exact science. Next, 3 manifested, 4 concealed. We're now in the airy realm of the Buddhic plane, which forms the next section of stanza 2. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Okay. But first, Efrosini has a question. She says,
Yes.
why are the stanzas given by the Tibetan in Cosmic Fire as stanzas of Dzyan are different from those given by EPM?
I think I've thought about this as well. I think they are additional stanzas. If you compare them, you'll see that they're that the first stanzas in TCF are, in terms of time, equivalent to the first stanza, first maybe a second stanza in a Secret Doctrine. But by stanza 2, you really have moved into a further stage, whereas the Secret Doctrine stanzas tend to stay on the subjective side for longer. So I think and of course, they're interpreted from Sinzar. So, in both cases, they were looking at pure symbol and then turning that or interpreting that into English. Certainly TCF was. SD got her information from a couple of different sources. One of the stanzas was entirely in Chinese, but she had work from the inner side, from masters on the inner side to help her interpret, whereas DK worked directly from the Sinzar symbols. So that alone is going to give you a different kind of interpretation. But they don't, in other words, it's not two versions of the same thing. They cover different subject matter. For instance, there's nothing in that's really equivalent to this second stanza in A Treatise on Cosmic Fire in any of the Secret Doctrine stanzas. And the period that it encompasses is actually much later in the Secret Doctrine stanzas. So it's not a definitive answer, but that's what my thoughts on the matter are. Okay, so can we get a reader?
Right. Yeah, Kirsten, can you read that for us, please?
Aum, said the mighty one. Let now the work proceed. Let the builders of the air continue with the plan. The Deva Lord and builders upon the plane of air worked with the forms within that sphere which is reckoned mainly theirs. They wrought for union, each in his group assigned. The molds grew fast beneath their hands. The sacred plan of juncture, the fourth great plane, became the sphere within the greater circle which marked the goal for man.
Okay, I have to resist the temptation to go into this because it's it's secondary to what we're doing, but you could see the extraordinary amount of insinuation, information here. So we will go on. We will forge ahead. So with the next stage, 4 produced, 3 hidden, we move into the element of fire and the monastic plane. Could we get a reader for this section from stanza 2?
Aaron, can you read that for us, please?
Aum, said the mighty one. He breathed forth to the fifths, the plain which is the burning ground, the meeting place for fire. This time a cosmic note is heard beneath the sounds systemic. The fire within, the fire without, meet with the fire ascending. The guardians of the cosmic fire, the Devas of phohatic heat, watched o'er the forms that formless stood, waiting a point in time. The builders of a lesser grade, Devas who work with matter, wrought at the forms. They stood in fourfold order. Upon the threefold levels in empty silence stood the forms. They vibrated. They responded to the key, yet useless stood and uninhabited.
Okay, so the threefold form or levels that are here described refer to the egoic lotus on right here. The threefold levels are right here, which on the involutionary arc were, quote, empty and silent until the flood inhabited, that life flood that inhabited. So the forms were built first. The division of the cosmic mental plane, which happens between the 3rd and 4th subplanes right here, divides the whole cosmic physical plane, is referenced in the next phrase. 4 and 1 Dzyan, which means fraction, revealed, 2 and 1/2 concealed. So we have the 4 planes and a half revealed, 2 1/2 concealed. Remember, this is an involutionary progression. So, on the return path, the lower ones are revealed first, and then we gradually reveal the higher ones. But this is that time when all these subplanes were gradually inhabited by form aspect built by the David kingdom. Okay, any thoughts about this? Any questions? Okay, next up, 6 to be manifested, 1 laid aside. So why laid aside instead of concealed like all the others? It could be because the physical plane is not considered a principle from a logoic perspective. We're now down to the astral plane and the element of water. Could we get a reader for this shorter part of stanza 2?
Kira, can you read that for us, please?
Said the mighty one, let the waters too bring forth, the builders of the watery sphere, the denizens of the moisture, produce the forms that move within the kingdom of Varuna. They grew and multiplied. In constant flux, they swayed. Each ebb of cosmic motion increased the endless flow. The ripple of the forms was seen.
It's a great description of the astral plane. Varuna is the ruler of the astral plane within the solar system. Next, lastly, 7 small wheels revolving. So we're down to the etheric, the true physical, which accretes to itself the lowest 3 subplanes. Could we get a reader for this?
Eleonora, can you read that, please?
Stanza 2. Said the mighty one, let the builders deal with matter. The molten solidified, the solid forms were built, the crust cooled, the rocks congealed. The builders wrought in turmoil to produce the forms of Maya. When the rocky strata were completed, the work stood in completion. The builders of the lowest grade announced the work was finished.
Thank you. And then finally, one giving birth to the other. This references the progressive transfer of the life waves within the rounds and globes of a chain. And also within within each level, that as the devas and the elementals progressed, quote unquote, involutionally, each acted as a foundation for the next to proceed. I saw a hand go up.
Yes, Robert, please go ahead.
I'm wondering what you think that sentence in the middle, the builders wrought in tumult to produce the forms of Maya. It almost seems inserted between these 2 very specific patterns.
Let me read it. Yeah, you're right. It's, he's describing the crust cooled, the rocks congealed. When the rocky strata were completed, the work stood in completion. So why, I don't have an answer for you really, Robert. Why would you characterize the work of the builders at this level to be in tumult? Possibly it's, the vibration of the physical, of the dense physical is a very tumultuous vibration. It's, when you're actually creating the outer forms. But other than that, I don't really know. If anybody has any thoughts on it, please.
Yeah, as you said that, maybe it's that, those solid forms are really tough to make. And so it's describing what it was like, and that these are the absolute forms of Maya. It's just kind of giving us a picture of what the builders had to go through. That's my guess.
Yeah, yeah. The idea that it was much more difficult somehow to
Yeah.
rot in tumult, or that somehow the vibration of these materials were tumultuous,
Well, maybe they don't like doing the forms of Maya. It's tough
well,
work.
these beings are dedicated to this plane,
Yeah, it's interesting.
all these stanzas raise way more questions than they answer, and yet they're a tantalizing look into what's going on. Also, this is all about the mineral kingdom. We're just an astral, and the focus is on the mineral because that's that point of the farthest point in the parabola. This stanza doesn't end here. The next part deals with the vegetable kingdom as a covering, but because it's actually a development of the kingdoms, I didn't include that because it's not a part of the nature of these of this verse, right? But yeah, it continues for another full page. Okay, so yeah, one giving birth to the other, it suggests, either or both, the idea that every one of these is like dependent on the foundation that was provided by the previous, and also possibly this idea that the life wave, because that's what we're talking about here, moves through each globe, and each time these physical subplanes have to be rebuilt, right? So as it moves through the rounds, they're rebuilt each time by the Deva kingdoms. Okay. Let's take a look at MPH's comments on this verse. Could we get a reader? Here on the right, please.
Robert, can you read that, please?
Gradually, these wheels unfolded, and the spirit of the globe took up its dwelling in them, one after the other. By means of these 7 stages that are called the days of creation, the spirit of the globes gradually passed from its invisible source to its invisible ultimate. Each of these globes was born out of the preceding one and became the parent of the next. The hosts of lives evolving through and upon these globes passed from one to another in their endless search for the promised land.
Okay, any thoughts about this interpretation? I found it insightful that the MPH linked the 7 involutional stages with the biblical 7 days of creation. But I think is more involved in this involutional downward sweep than just the passage of the life wave through the globes. This is part of it, no question. But more fundamental is the successive conditioning and bringing into manifested expression each of the 7 planes of the cosmic physical plane. I think that's somehow is more fundamental. Of course, where's that chart on the globes? This is it. The whole thing could be seen in terms of these 7 levels of progression through rounds. But I think more fundamental is this idea of moving through down into the subplanes. Also, just the way they're described, both in the verse and in stanza 2 by TCF, it seems more apropos. Okay, so that takes us through verse 3. Any final thoughts on this? it's easy to let this language just, put you to sleep, 6 concealed, 2 manifested, 5 concealed, 3 manifested, 4 concealed, 4 produced, 3, but each marks a very specific and monumental achievement in the involutional process. Alrighty, on to verse 4, which reads, he builds them in the likeness of older worlds, placing them on the imperishable centers. How does Fohat build them? He collects the fiery dust. He makes balls of fire, runs through them and round them, infusing life thereinto, then sets them into motion, some one, some the other way. They are cold. He makes them hot. They are dry. He makes them moist. They shine. He fans and cools them. Thus acts Fohat from one twilight to the other during 7 eternities. From a subjective standpoint, this will tell you more about Fohat than all the definitions given. It's I find it quite beautiful. So there's a short.
Francis?
Yeah.
Sorry, Trudy says evolution through earthquakes and volcanoes.
Are you asking if evolution takes place through earthquakes and volcanoes? I would assume that's it's.
Trudy, do you want to clarify?
Yeah, I was thinking about the building, and
Yeah.
was wondering whether it has all evolved through volcanic eruptions and earthquakes.
Yeah. So was that
to form?
Right. So was the mineral kingdom brought into objective reality through earthquakes and volcanic? It's an interesting question. You certainly all these elementals are involved in those processes, and I think you could say that the distribution of the mineral kingdom is so that it could later be inhabited by the higher kingdoms, depended on earthquakes, both earthquakes and volcanic activity. It's a good question. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so there's a short footnote at the end of the verse itself. See right up here that, no, wait a minute, that's not where we are. That references the term eternities, right? So here's the footnote, and it just says a period of 311 trillion 40 billion years, according to Brahmanical calculations. This is the period of 1 Maha Manvantara. So DK links the term Maha Manvantara with a solar logoic cycle, more specifically with the cycle of objectivity of a solar logos. In a treatise on cosmic fire, he describes a Manvantara, not a Maha Manvantara, but just a Manvantara, as a, quote, day of Brahma. But the term Maha Manvantara is not so specific. Sometimes it's described as 1 year of Brahma. Remember the Manvantara is 1 day of Brahma. And in other instances, it's described as 100 years of Brahma. I found the most useful comparisons on the length of pralaya from a treatise on cosmic fire. If we could get a reader, please.
I'll go ahead and read it. In considering planetary pralar, I can't even talk today. I might not read it. We might briefly enumerate the following periods of quiescence, between two globes in a chain. This covers the period of abstraction of the seeds of all life and its transference from one sphere to another. The seed Manu of a globe gathers all the life forces into himself, as does the Logos at the close of a system, and as also transpires at the close of a chain, and holds them quiescent in his aura. This covers a period of a manvantara, or of 1 day of
Brahma.
Brahma. Is that how you say that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, people say
Between
Brahma.
two chains. Yeah, between two chains. This covers the period of a Maha Manvantara, or of 1 year of Brahma. There are many ways of arriving at the greater cycles, but there is no need to confuse with the intricacies of figures. The 10 Prajapatis or Rishis, or the 10 planetary logoi, manifest through their 10 schemes in time and space, the hour of their appearing differing. Each likewise manifests, as does the Logos, through a septenate and a triad, making again a 10 of perfection. Between two solar systems. This covers the period of 100 years of Brahma, and through the study of the planetary cycles, comprehension of these greater cycles may come. Complication comes to the student nevertheless in the fact that 2 of the schemes cover their cyclic periods in 5 rounds, while others have 7. One scheme has but 3 rounds, but a mystery is hidden here. On the inner round, one planet has 9 cycles to run before the purpose of its Lord is completed.
So, even though this is to elaborate on the footnote about the Mahamanvatara, there's some useful information here, because we're actually going to be moving into this subject matter pretty quickly in the Secret Doctrine. So you can see here he's saying 1 year of Brahma is Mahamanvantara. And over here, between two solar systems, you have 100 years of Brahma. Well, what do you call that? Mahamanvantara? Well, the term is inexact. It means really, really long time, and one figure that's given is 311 trillion years, as shown here. Okay, any thoughts about this? So could we get a...
Robert has his hand up. Go ahead,
Um,
Robert.
Could you go back to the Fohat page for a moment, just before this? At the last line in verse 4, thus acts Fohat from one twilight to the other during 7 eternities. Now, does that mean that Fohat is working, does his work between the twilights? Or does that mean Fohat works in a twilight and then works again in the next twilight?
It just means he's a shady character, basically.
I mean, this description, I don't know, maybe I'm projecting into it. He's really seems like he's into it, He's collecting the dust, he's making the balls, you get
right.
an image of this almost enjoying the process.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Especially the way this verse is constructed.
Yeah.
Okay, just by the very activity of Fohat, he has to be working from, you could say, dawn to twilight, right? Not during the pralayas themselves, because all is suspended. In a systemic pralaya, you could say frozen in situ, and all form aspect is suspended. All building, all change is suspended, and you're in reunion with the spirit aspect, right? And then the next solar system hits, there's a new, there are a new series of rays controlling a whole new structural aspect in play, and Fohat begins again to work to bind spirit and form, right? Working from twilight to dusk, you could say.
Yeah, no, I like that. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and we'll get into interpreting this again. I'll look into this further when I do the interpretation of this first. Okay, so okay, so could we get a reader for HPB's first paragraph of section A of the commentary, which references, he builds them in the likeness of older worlds, and places them on the imperishable centers. Okay, a reader, please.
Yvonne, can you read that, please?
The worlds are built in the likeness of older wheels, i.e., those that existed in preceding Manvantaras and went into Pralaya. Because the law for the birth, growth, and decay of everything in cosmos, from the sun to the glowworm in the grass, is one. It is an everlasting work of perfection with every new appearance. But the substance, matter, and forces are all one and the same. But this law acts on every planet through minor and varying laws. The imperishable Laya centers have a great importance, and their meaning must be fully understood if we would have a clear conception of the archaic cosmogony, yeah, whose studies have now passed into occultism. At present, one thing may be stated. The worlds are built neither upon nor over or in the Laya centers, the 0 point being a condition, not any mathematical point.
Okay, thanks, Yvonne.
Mm-hmm.
So first up, the worlds are built in the likeness of older wheels, that is, those that existed in previous Manvantaras. So let's get a little more insight on this. Can we get a reader for this, please, from TCF?
Yes, Trudy, can you read that for us, please?
The fire latent in matter, itself a product of an earlier manifestation of the same cosmic identity, or the relatively perfected quality worked out by him in a previous cosmic incarnation, is set in motion again by the desire of that same identity to circle once more the wheel of rebirth. Treatise on Cosmic Fire 240. The objective universe is but the product of some subjective mind. Next, we must posit that the material for the building of this universe lay ready to the hand of the builder, and that this material itself is the fruit of some previous system, all that is left of some past consummated product. Again, Treatise on Cosmic Fire 572.
Thank you. Any thoughts about this? So the material aspect of an earlier cycle made up of the lesser lives of the 6th and 7th hierarchies is redeemed and reconditioned, that is made so that it can resonate to the vibration of the current cycle, so that it's a fit vehicle for the present cycle. And esoteric healing talks a lot about the problems in that, disease, et cetera, that are just inherent in substance. And it's because it came from an imperfect previous cycle. So just the fact that we inhabit material sheaths in part subjects us to these difficult conditions like disease, etc. Okay, next, and went into Pralaya because the law for the birth, growth, and decay of everything in cosmos, from the sun to the glowworm in the grass, is one. That is, the law is one. This one law is the law of periodicity, which governs all manifestation from solar logos down to every kingdom of nature within his system. We just read about this in TCF when considering the lengths of the Manvantaras and Mahamanvantaras. Next, it is, did somebody speak?
Yes, sorry. We have a question from Efrosini. She says, since the previous worlds were imperfect, why build the new worlds on the basis of the old ones?
Because there is nothing else to build them from. There is no way of, in other words, it's all extrapolative. Let me back up a little bit more. The material worlds are made of hierarchies. I'm sorry, I don't have an illustration up right here, but you know what? It may be worth it to pull it up. Let me escape here a minute and pull this in. Okay, that should do it. Not perfect, but close enough. So here's the 7 hierarchies. So these 7 hierarchies are the extant hierarchies within our solar system. The first 2.5 of these are substantive. They provide the material. You know, they have such names as the elemental lives, the basket of nourishment, the blinded lives. All these hierarchies are in a process of evolution. These hierarchies existed in the previous solar system and were advanced enough to move beyond the level of manifestation. But these lower hierarchies were also present, but did not necessarily advance to the level that they were emancipated. So the evolution of the hierarchies could be, you can look at evolution in terms of the substantive evolution as well as the evolution of consciousness, right? They go together. The hierarchies are oriented towards the substantive aspect. So these are the sheaves of the atomic lives, whereas these are the sheaves of the solar angels. Here's the sheaves of the monads, but they're all sheaths, right? The only way that we gain the next level of these substantive of the form aspect is through the evolution of these hierarchies. So in this solar system, we are using it's the same hierarchies coming forth, and as they evolve, we use the substance from them. That's not a perfect answer, but that hopefully will give you some idea of what I'm talking about here. You could say that it's all part of the one continuum of the solar logos, the unfolding of the life of the solar logos through the seven chakras of that logos, represented by the seven sacred planets. And all that's done through the inhabiting of the form aspect, which are represented by the hierarchies extant during that solar logoic life. So I see Yvonne's hand up.
Yes, go ahead, Yvonne.
I was just thinking maybe that's sort of like when we, law of rebirth, we use the same material from our body that we've hopefully transformed and gotten it up to a certain level, our personality bodies. When we come back again, we use that same material. We start from there. We don't get a higher grade or a lesser grade, but we use the material from that first body to build our new body.
Yeah, that's an excellent example. It's a kind of microcosmic illustration of what we're talking about here. You have these permanent atoms, the physical, the astral, and the mental unit, right? And upon abstraction, a certain nexus, which is the information having to do with the level of evolution that you've attained for those three sheaths of physical, astral, mental, is stored in those permanent units, permanent atoms and the mental unit, right? And then when you reincarnate, those are reassumed. So you could say this exactly, the same thing is going on with the evolution of the planets. You take on that which you have completed in an earlier cycle and continue the work, right? Also, this is the only way that the lesser lives are able to evolve, right? These lowest hierarchies are only evolve as a result of their participation in the form building aspect of the higher consciousness, of the higher hierarchies. They're literally drawn up through their participation with the higher hierarchies, right? And you could say that's true of a human being. We're cells in the body of the solar logos. Through its process of becoming includes our emancipation, that is our own evolution. They're not separate. Same thing with planetary logos. I saw Robert's hand.
Yes, Robert.
Yeah.
Please.
Looks like we're way beyond God said, "Let there be light," which is really, really fascinating. I've never understood like the permanent atoms. I don't know, and again, who knows? But I don't know if it's that the same materials are actually being put in some kind of suspended state, or somehow the permanent atoms they have the program to generate exactly what's in it. I don't know, but I always wondered.
That's much closer to it. Yeah, when you die, the materials, nothing dies, right? What's happened is that unifying principle is released. So, all the little atoms that make up your body become discrete individual atoms and move back into either the earth or they're subsumed,
the pool, the kind of pool of energy or life or whatever.
Right. Well, literally the life of the atoms themselves are they stay in existence, right? And if you're burned, then they go through their own transformation. But that's gone. That literal body is gone. This is one of the problems with modern Christianity, is the idea, that we all lay around in our graves for a zillion years, and then the Christ comes, blows a trumpet, And, it must be a horrible stench, when everybody finally opens the grave. And come on, it's so infantile, like the concept, it has to be pitched onto a higher understanding. And the permanent atoms is a part of that system that creates that higher understanding. It holds, you could say, the blueprint.
Mhm.
But it's not just the blueprint of the body, it's the blueprint of the stage of evolution of that form aspect, whether it's mental, astral, or physical, right? That's what the permanent atoms hold. And then they're rebuilt by the elemental kingdom in accordance with that, right? With that recognition of that stage, right? So it's reconstructed along those lines. And yet, in that reconstruction, you have a continuation, you literally pick up where you left off, because the consciousness that you come to in that stage is now able to move to its next step, just as the physical three sheaths are. They work very much hand in hand. That's why at some point it becomes impossible to incarnate. For instance, Sanat Kumara is unable to incarnate any deeper than the etheric level, because it's at his level of consciousness, it's literally impossible to take a physical sheath, right?
He doesn't have that program of permanent atoms anymore that would include the kind of things we're talking about.
Well, actually he does, but it's a completely, it's shaped by his own intent. It's not shaped by the karma of his past. He's free of the kind of karma that shaped our sheaths. His is shaped in accordance with his intent, his purpose, right?
This is oddly related to what you were talking about before, with that question of the entities being called away from different work, or other
Right.
work. Now,
All right.
I wonder, does that mean, so we have the intent to incarnate, we're going to need to generate a certain kind of material? Is that always available, or is Costco out of the product sometime and we have to wait? You know what I mean? And again, unknowable, but interesting.
Yeah, well, that's one of the great worries about global warming is, we may so alter the physical plane potential for sustaining human forms that we're literally unable to incarnate. This is a whole other subject, so we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, we have a couple of comments while these discussions were going on.
Yeah, good.
Efrazini says, this means that the creator is dependent from the material which used. He is not omnipotent.
The creator, that's a big umbrella, that term creator. So you have the literal Brahma aspect, who is the divine, you could call it third logos, right? Who then divides into 7 energy streams, within which are the kingdoms of devas and builders, who then use the elementals to create the literal form. So, it depends at what level you're pitching the term creator, right? The creator aspect is third, or form aspect.
Okay, I have one more from Yvonne, but I just wanted to insert in here, this reminds me of the difference in the planets, that we have some sacred planets and some non-sacred planets, and that both the Earth and the Sun are non-sacred planets who are working on becoming sacred. And it's all part and parcel of this process. And if as below, so above, then it's not only the same process that happens to us as individuals trying to make it back to our spiritual self, but also the planets go through the same process, the solar system, the greater universe, it yada yada all the way up. So
Right.
that's what this reminds me of, what the
Right.
discussions that you guys are talking about.
Yeah, that's right. And that, any given entity, like a human being, is made up of, we're made up of 4 hierarchies, right? From, the literal atoms of our body, all the way up to the monad itself, right? On the second subplane. That all is part of the human being, and it's all progressing. But interestingly, each hierarchy is drawn into the one above it, and that's the motive energy of this progression, right? So it all progresses together. Okay, anyone else before we move on? Get back to it.
Yes, and then Yvonne says, again, in reference to all that we've been talking about, it's a meritocracy. We earn the right to.
Described as a meritocracy, that your level of evolution is based on your own merit. Exactly, right? So, yeah, good. All right, let's see, get out of this one, go back to here, and go back to here. Okay, let's see where the heck we were.
Let me ask, Martha, did you have a question? I see that your mic is open.
I hope this is relevant to the issue. I think sometimes our discussions open up to us the handicap of our language, and that the word omnipotence really has to do with old structures that don't belong to philosophies of panentheism. I was just hearing that where in this class our consciousness is actually changing is to recognize we're trafficking in 2 different levels of discourse often, and that it has to be a challenge to Francis to try to straddle these 2 different choices. So I guess all I was going to say, perhaps terms like omnipotence no longer apply to the system that Blavatsky was actually really challenging us with. I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, it's ever updated. Every system is itself a structure and has to be reborn itself. And, a good example of that is at least most people who read DK consider the Alice Bailey works as a reincarnation, you could say, the new structural form of theosophy, or whatever you want to call it. Some people call it DK theosophy, whatever. And if you compare the 2, you can see how related they are, and they complement each other. Yet in the overall, there's a kind of new, improved aspect to the DK work. Don't tell, old dyed-in-the-wool theosophists that they won't hear anything of it. There's a great rejection of DK theosophy among many theosophists, but which is a great tragedy, really, because it's there's no inherent conflict. It's only the divisiveness that has created that. Anyway, let's move ahead. It's everlasting work of perfection with every new appearance, right on key with what we're talking about. Everlasting work of perfection. You could say this is why the forms are not created anew out of this is why the old forms are reused and rebuilt with every new appearance. Every incarnation, whether plant or planet, is a means of perfecting the form aspect so that it may be a more fit vehicle for the indwelling jiva. It's the consciousness that drives this change, right? Who is itself on an evolutionary path of ever greater perfection. These stages of relative perfection are stored in the permanent atoms on every subplane of the cosmic physical plane, which is a good reminder that it's not just the ones that take you in and out of incarnation, but there are permanent atoms on every subplane. Okay, next up, but the substance, matter, and forces are all one and the same. This is connected with the first statement, the worlds are built in the likeness of older wheels. The substance matter, which is ruled by the fire inherent in matter, is formed, dissolved, and reformed under the direction of Fohat. The quality of that existing substance used in form creation is progressively based on the consciousness of the indwelling jiva. That is to say, it literally keeps pace with the consciousness of the indweller. I saw a hand.
Yes, Robert, please go ahead.
Up above where it talked about the law for the birth, growth, and decay of everything in cosmos, and with this next sentence that's coming up about the law, I think that might be, it might not be the law of periodicity. It might be the law, kind of the big mother law, the law that includes all laws, which is implied then again how, the next sentence which will come up.
Yeah, that's generally called the law of nature, right? It's the law in which all other laws participate.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's, it's a good argument. But it's, there is nothing that doesn't partake of the law of periodicity, so, and all substance matter and all forces and all consciousness is subject to that law as well. Let's read on and see if we can get some clarity on that. Okay. Next, but this law acts on every planet through minor and varying laws. This is a huge subject, but just to get an idea of the parameters, let's take a look at this list of subsidiary laws of the laws of periodicity. All these are subject to the law of periodicity. And this is from the early pages of, very early pages, page 5 and 6 of a treatise on cosmic fire. That's relevant because he lays out certain fundamentals right in the beginning. So could we get a reader for this? It won't hurt just to become somewhat familiar with these laws. Many of them will be familiar to you.
Robert, oh, sorry. Robert, would you like to enumerate the laws?
Be my karma to read this one.
It is.
There is a basic law called the law of periodicity. 1, this law governs all manifestation, whether it is the manifestation of a solar logos through the medium of the solar system, or the manifestation of a human being through the medium of a form. This law controls likewise in all the kingdoms of nature. 2, there are certain other laws in the system which are linked with this one. Some of them are as follows. A, law of economy, the law governing matter, the third aspect. B, the law of attraction, the law governing soul, the second aspect. C, the law of synthesis, the law governing spirit, or the first aspect. 3, these 3 are cosmic laws. There are 7 systemic laws. which govern the manifestation of our solar logos. A, the law of vibration. B, the law of cohesion. C, the law of disintegration. D, the law of magnetic control. E, the law of fixation. F, the law of love. G, the law of sacrifice and death.
Thanks, Robert. So, that'll teach you to speak up.
Okay, that's it. I'm done.
Okay. So, I agree with you that you read, law of periodicity, it sounds like, just one of many laws, like it could be included in this last list. But DK really does elevate this law in this list. This is the main reason I chose it as being the law that HPB is talking about. Though in other places I've seen it described just as simply the law of nature, right? But that law is not really described. It's just the overriding. You could call it the law of manifestation, the fact of manifestation and the means by which that happens. Okay, so next up, the imperishable lay of centers have a great importance, and their meaning must be fully understood if we would have a clear conception of the archaic cosmogony, whose theories have now passed into occultism. So the imperishable lay of centers was the subject of the second verse. Quote, the swift and radiant one produces the 7 Leia centers, against which none will prevail to the great day be with us. So let's revisit this quote, cited a couple of webinars ago, but coming up in our reading in just a few pages. Could we get a reader, please?
Kirsten, can you read that, please?
Yes. When Fouhat is said to produce 7 Leia centers, it means that for formative or creative purposes, the great law, theists may call it God, stops or rather modifies its perpetual motion on 7 invisible points within the area of the manifested universe. The great breath digs through space 7 holes into Leia to cause them to circumgyrate during Manvantara occult catechism.
Great, thank you. Okay, so
DK came to my, the HPB came to my defense with the great law, throwing a curveball into the whole discussion.
yeah, it remains elusive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If anybody'd like to describe what this great law is, especially if you have a booming bass voice, then
I just want to say the arcane school offers it, the great law that overrides is the law of compassion, but it's meant in an entirely different way than the moral Christian just concept is. But that's what, or the law of synthesis.
Yeah, you could see how, that this is like that term Mahamanvantara, right? It's all depends on context, as to what the great law is. And could you say that that's the law that creates, the will to be and compassion are very connected. It's desire based. It's a love oriented law, the will to be, which drives the whole process of manifestation. Okay, so next, the worlds are built neither upon nor over nor in the Leia centers or Leia centers. The 0 point being a condition not any mathematical points. So important. So Alaya Center is not a locale, but rather a specific vibrational field, creating an environment conducive to the builders who are drawn into that environment for the purpose of building forms, expressive of the quality and consciousness of that environment, right? You get a sense of that? So it's not a place. It's a field of endeavor that allows for certain results to precipitate. Okay, next we move into HPB's commentary on the B section, which states, how does Fohat build him? He collects the fiery dust. He makes balls of fire, runs through them, round them, infusing life thereinto, then sets them into motion, some one, some the other way. They are cold, he makes them hot. They are dry, he makes them moist. They shine, he fans and cools them. So that's what this much longer section relates to. And actually, she doesn't speak to this last section at all, so I didn't highlight that. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Martha, can you read that, please?
Thank you. B, bear in mind that Fohat, the constructive force of cosmic electricity, is said metaphorically to have sprung like Rudra from Brahma, from the brain of the father and the bosom of the mother, and then to have metamorphosed himself into a male and a female, that is, polarity, into positive and negative electricity. He has 7 sons who are his brothers, and Fohat is forced to be born time after time whenever any 2 of his son brothers indulge in too close contact, whether an embrace or a fight. To avoid this, he binds together and unites those of unlike nature and separates those of similar temperaments. This, of course, relates, as anyone can see, to electricity generated by friction and to the law involving attraction between 2 objects of unlike and repulsion between those of like polarity.
Thank you, Martha. Okay, first up, bear in mind that Fohat, the constructive force of a cosmic electricity, is said metaphorically to have sprung like Rudra from Brahma, from the brain of the father and the bosom of the mother. So knowing in advance the connection between Fohat and Rudra makes it much easier to spot the metaphors in this passage from Dowson's classical dictionary of Hindu mythology and religion. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes. Eleonora, can you read that, please?
I will try, because that particular word with the PRI.
Let me read it for you. In the
Thank you.
Brihadaranyaka Upanishad.
Okay, the Rudas are 10 vital breaths, prana, with the heart, manas, as the 11th. In the Vishnu Purana, the god Ruda is said to have sprung from the forehead of Brahma, and at the command of that god to have separated his nature into male and female, then to have multiplied each of these into 11 persons, some of which were white and gentle, others black and furious. Elsewhere, it is said that the 11 Rudas were sons of Kashyapa and Shurabhai. And in another chapter of the same Purana, it is represented that Brahma desired to create a son, and that Ruda came into existence as a youth. He wept and asked for a name, and Brahma gave him the name Ruda, but he wept 7 times more, and so he obtained 7 other names. Brahva,
Why
Sharva.
didn't I read this? Bhava,
Yes,
Sarva, Isana, Pasupati, Bhima, Ugra, and Mahadeva. And this is from Dowson's great classical dictionary.
thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. So, FYI, in keeping with the description 10 vital breaths, prana, with the heart manas as the 11th, we find 10 faces in the sculpture of Rudra shown here. Interesting. This description might give us a clue as to the true nature of another androgynous deity who sprang from the forehead of her father. This one we're much more familiar with, Athena, representing the monastic principle in Greek mythology. Same idea, though, in both cases. So next, and then to have metamorphosed himself into a male and a female, that is polarity into positive and negative electricity. So, you know, to go back here, you could, if you were reading this out of context of the Secret Doctrine, it may never occur to you that this is an electrical description, that Rudra was in fact this great Phohatic being. But we have the advantage of the Secret Doctrine perspective, right? So the characteristic white and gentle, opposite black and furious, describes this, in very poetic terms, describes this electrical polarity. He has 7 sons who are his brothers. We read about these brothers in our study of verse 3, quote, Phohat on the different planes is known as ether, air, fire, water, electricity, ether, prana, in similar terms. They are his sons because they emerge from the Akashic plane, the father-mother principle within the cosmic physical plane. They are his brothers because, as does he, they demonstrate a particular quality of systemic electricity on each subsequent subplane. Next, Phohat is forced to be born time after time whenever any 2 of his son brothers indulge in too close contact, whether an embrace or a fight. Too close an embrace is a description of the law of attraction as between 2 opposite poles, you know, positive and minus negative magnetic poles. A fight indicates the law of repulsion, which takes place between 2 poles of the same polarity. Either condition has a canceling effect that requires a, quote, rebirth of the electrical current. Next, to avoid this, he binds together and unites those of unlike nature and separates those of similar temperaments. Each subplane of the cosmic physical plane has a positive causal spiritual aspect and a negative or form-based aspect. Phohat, quote, binds these together by infusing form with spirit. The old commentary describes the separation and alternation of the spiritually and materially oriented subplanes as separating those of similar temperaments. So, for example, over here on this chart, this physical aspect of the astral is separated by this physical aspect of the physical by the positive or spirit aspect of the physical. In each case, they're and are separated. So the causal levels of the mental are separated from the causal levels of the intuitive by this a form aspect of the Buddhic plane, right? So they're held in a working order, you could say, by that separation. At least that's one interpretation of what she's saying. Okay. Finally, HPB relates his phohatic activity to the laws of attraction and repulsion. So next up, whoop. Could we get a reader, please?
Kira, can you read that for us, please?
The seven sons brothers, however, represent and personify the seven forms of cosmic magnetism called, in practical occultism, the seven radicals, whose cooperative and active progeny are, among other energies, electricity, magnetism, sound, light, heat, cohesion, etc. Occult science defines all these as supersensuous effects in their hidden behavior and as objective phenomena in the world of senses, the former requiring abnormal faculties to perceive them. The latter are ordinary physical senses. They all pertain to and are the emanations of still more supersensuous spiritual qualities, not personated by, but belonging to real and conscious causes. To attempt a description of such entities would be worse than useless. The reader must bear in mind that, according to our teaching, which regards this phenomenal universe as a great illusion, the nearer a body to the unknown substance, the more it approaches reality as being removed the farther from this world of Maya.
Thank you. So first up, the seven sons brothers, however, represent and personify the seven forms of cosmic magnetism called in practical occultism the seven radicals. This statement is followed by a listing, which, except for electricity, is not the same as that given by us by DK. This is because DK lists the elements that rule each of the subplanes, whereas HPB describes the energetic expressions through which these elements demonstrate. For example, magnetism, sound, and light are each specifically conditioned and thus demonstrate in a unique way under the influence of each element. Thus, sound, for instance, is on the astral plane experiences clairaudience, on the Buddhic plane as comprehension, and on the Atmic plane as the beatitudes or the music of the spheres. Next, occult science defines all these as supersensuous effects in their hidden behavior and as objective phenomena in the world of senses, the former requiring abnormal faculties to perceive them, the latter our ordinary physical senses. So, as just described, magnetism, sound, light, etc., are supersensuous effects which vary depending on the plane on which they are manifesting, and thus require, quote, abnormal faculties to perceive them, except, of course, on the physical plane. Next, they all pertain to and are the emanations of still more supersensuous spiritual qualities, not personated by, but belonging to real and conscious causes. So at least some of these real and conscious causes can be found in the laws governing the various levels of phohatic demonstration that HPB just listed. For example, the law of cohesion, of which DK tells us the following. Could we get a reader? Wait a minute. Here we go.
The law of cohesion on the second plane. Cohesion is first apparent. It is the first molecular plane of the system and is the home of the monad. Divine coherency is demonstrated. It is the law of birth, if we might use that term, resulting in the appearance of the monads in their 7 groups. Love is the source and the monad of love, the result. The atomic subplane sets the rate of vibration. The law of cohesion might be said to fix the coloring of each plane.
Okay, who knew, right? Any thoughts or questions about this? So next up, to attempt a description of such entities would be worse than useless. The entity in question is a phohatic being, a living nexus of electrical energy that demonstrates the quality of, in the case of our examples, the second ray lord. I saw a hand.
Yes, Robert, please go ahead.
It seems like in this stuff, she's dancing around a little bit about whether these are entities or immaterial. You know, like that great statue of Rudra that you just showed us,
Right.
which is all the people in India who believe that that's a real being. So you've got, at the very least, an astro Rudra, okay? But here, it's almost like every sentence in this description, in one sentence, she's kind of dancing toward it's kind of an entity, and then moving away from that, like, and even here, to attempt a description of such entities would be worse than useless, which is not the same as saying that they're not entities.
No, it certainly isn't. Yeah, you know, even Decay describes Fohat as an entity who is a demonstration of intelligent electricity, you know, and, you know, that can mess you up for a while trying to figure out what does intelligent electricity look like? You know, well, we get some idea just in that description of his law of cohesion, right? This idea of it allows duality to exist. It literally is the source of divine attraction, and it's and therefore you could say beingness, that is that fundamental phohatic union of spirit and matter is made possible. What makes that possible, DK describes as a phohatic entity. You know, I've never been able to get a satisfactory answer to the question you're asking there as to really why is Fohat an entity? Well, he demonstrates as intelligent electricity.
In the Secret Doctrine somewhere, it says, we state that electricity is an entity.
There it is.
Yeah, so it's really, I mean, it's fascinating.
It is, and it's really hard to wrap your head around, mainly because our bias about what an entity is.
Mhm.
You know, we don't, you know, we aren't able to conceive, as she says, we aren't able to conceive of entified electricity because of our bias about what an entity is, you know. So, yeah. You know, I think that kind of thing is going to be a secret of initiation. I find that these persistent mysteries that hold no matter how much you read, I think they end up only getting revealed through initiation ultimately. Okay, next up.
Okay, first,
Go ahead.
Yvonne adds Lord Agni.
Yeah, perfect example. You know, it's the, you could say, personification of fire and on all the planes, how it, in other words, the specific energy that manifests as fire at whatever level. So that would be, you know, the gaseous physical, the literal mental or monastic plane, that's on 7 levels, as well as the cosmic mental plane. All that is aspects of a being, you know, that is called Agni. And there's, you know, DK talks about, in fact, he basically titles an entire section of a treatise on cosmic fire. Note the name of that book, Agni. So it's, yeah, it's a good example, maybe the best example. Okay, anyone else? All right. The reader must bear in mind that according to our teaching, which regards this phenomenal universe as a great illusion, the nearer a body is to the unknown substance, the more it approaches reality as being removed, the farther from the world of Maya. And when incarnated and thus most susceptible to the great illusion, it seems just the opposite, that the dense physical, astral, or mental seems the most real, you know, which is one of the reasons we're having so much difficulty wrapping our head around the idea of, for instance, intified, intelligent electricity, right? This passage from volume 8, and we'll end on this, of HPB's collected writings gives us further insight into this idea. Can we get a reader, please?
Aaron, can you read that for us, please?
According to this system, the external world of this, our present consciousness, is the joint product of object and subject. While non-existent per se, it is said that creation of the individual mind, matter is equally the sensible manifestation of the objectivity of an unknown substance, unknown to the profane only. Mind translates the impressions received from without, impressions radiating from the world of noumenon, into panorama of purely subjective ideation. The object as it is given in consciousness is phenomenal, but the primary stimulus comes from without. Subject and object as noumenon are equally real, but the sense object is a subjective creation. Take, for example, the case of the sun. To the realist, the glorious orb exists outside of and independently of mind, just as it appears in consciousness. To the idealist, it is the creation of mind and perishes with it. To the objective idealist, the mind perishes, the phenomenal sun, but an unknown substance, removed beyond the probability of human conception as to its nature, remains. This, except the unknown substance, the occultist will deny. For him, the subject as much as the object, ego, sun, mind, and the universe itself is a Maya, a huge illusion. But as both the perceiver and the object perceived belong to the same plane of illusion, they are mutual and reciprocal realities for such time as the Manvantaric illusion lasts.
So, you know, one of the things she's saying here is that it completely depends on the perspective of the observer. You know, we're considering Fohat as intelligent electricity, able through the law of cohesion to bind spirit and matter. Well, you know, mostly that's just words, because how can you conceive of such a thing? You know, we have no real world references that allow us to build that reality in our imagination, you know. So it itself becomes a stimulus that helps us to reach towards our own intuition, to try to gain some additional awareness that will allow us to put that together. So, and with that, we're going to have to leave it. See this, I'll announce the next webinar, which is this coming Friday, will be the next iteration of the Treatise on Cosmic Fire. I think it's number 6, our 6th one. We're still working a lot with the fascinating subject of the etheric body and prana. And so I hope to see you there. And then do you want to announce the next 2?
Okay. The next Secret Doctrine is going to be on the 16th of October at 7 p.m. And before that, we'll have the next Secret Teaching of All Ages, which will be on October 2nd at 7 p.m. So we hope to see you all there.
Great. And thank you all for participating. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.